offers and stuff. This first disclosure, and for those of you watching at home on video, the last class on disclosures that is posted on my social media, we went over only the transfer disclosure statement and seller property questionnaire, the two most important, so you can reference that class for part 1, this is part 2. Okay, so back to our first disclosure in the remainder of our disclosure package is the market conditions advisory. This is actually included with your residential purchase agreement contract. It will automatically be part of the RPA and CAR forms. RPA is residential purchase agreement. Sorry, guys, please stop me when I use acronyms and ask me, okay? I've been doing it for so long I don't even think about it anymore. So market conditions advisory, this is simply a notification to your clients that the buyer is responsible for determining the price they want to offer on a property. As an agent, you guys obviously need to provide your professional opinion. You need to provide actual comps that you can show to them, right? That's your duty as an agent. However, no matter what you're showing to your clients or what you're recommending to your clients, it's ultimately your client's choice at the end of the day. If they want to offer less and start that way, you would explain, if you're in a multiple offer situation, that may mean they may not get a counter. That may mean they lose out, and sometimes that's what needs to happen before your buyer's really ready to write on a property. That's what you've got to do. Don't get frustrated, it's part of the process, it's how you show your worth to your clients. On the flip side right now, Tamara and I have an escrow where we don't think that the property will appraise for the value the sellers want for the property. However, the buyers wanted the property so badly, we made them very aware of that, aware of what happens when a property doesn't appraise and how they might need to bring extra cash into closing to make their lender happy. They decided to move forward, and as long as that's disclosed, we're all on the same page, it's good. So the second item on here, so I went through buyer considerations, that was number 2. I'll skip back up to number 1 on market conditions. Right now, it's still a seller's market, especially for property that's placed in geographical locations that is desirable. And because it's still a seller's market, obviously we have more buyers than we have property to sell. So you need to set your buyers up for the fact that there could be multiples on a property. That this whole section is just going over that. So now I'll skip down to section 2B, non-contingent offers. So I have a whole class that I teach on making a truly contingency-free offer or accepting a truly contingency-free offer. Unless your client is a very experienced buyer or a developer on a rehab project, I wouldn't advise going in contingency-free. There will be times you have buyers who are so financially qualified, their lender tells you that they can go in with no loan contingency. And that's fine, just make sure you get that in writing from the buyer's lender, and that the buyer is also on board with it. Just because a lender says they can do it, does not mean that the buyer is comfortable with doing that. So you can lift any contingency going into an escrow. However, lifting the contingency for, let's say, seller disclosure or physical condition, you can do that, and the seller and listing agent might accept it, but it's not necessarily contingency free, because if they haven't provided you with seller disclosures up front, building report if it's City of LA, then obviously once they provide those documents to you, you have sort of an ace in the pocket, automatic 5 days once new disclosure is made to you if you lift those contingencies at the time you make an offer. So just keep that in mind. You're not truly making a contingency-free offer. It's kind of a jerk move if you need to go that way, make a contingency-free offer, and then say, oops, sorry, you gave us new disclosures, now we get 5 days, because that's the rule. Any disclosure after a contingency is lifted or after a contingency period is expired automatically gets you 5 more days. Okay, but be nice about it. It is a jerk move to do it that way. Instead, you might want to gently educate the listing agent. My clients would like to go in lifting this contingency. Do you have the documents and information that we need? Title report, disclosure package, building report, all of those things. If you're going to make an offer that is lifting contingencies, you'll want to talk to a mentor, and you're not familiar or comfortable, you'll want to talk to your mentor, or you'll want to talk to the broker or someone like me before doing that, so that you can properly explain that to your client and or guide the listing agent through doing it so that it's actually legitimate. Okay? So the next page of the market conditions advisory is, we're gonna skip through 3 because we already covered that along with the inspection contingency. There is one note I wanna make about that. If your buyer chooses to waive inspections of any sort, there is a document called BIW. Sorry, that's the acronym. So in car forms, if you type in BIW, that is Buyer Inspection Waiver. Cover yourself and cover our brokerage if your client wants to waive any inspections. BIW. For you, we are at the top of page 2 of the MCA. Yeah, you're welcome. So you'll see item C here on page 2, broker recommendations. We recommend that they don't write a non-contingent offer, and for the reasons that we just discussed. D goes over multiple offers. We've already talked about that. And then section 3 is seller considerations. So you know, this document is going to be included with the residential purchase price, but you know, it's basically just telling sellers that prices can change up or down faster than sale prices can be reported. What does that mean? That means if you're advising a seller on market value using comps, that there very well may be comps in the area that are under contract that haven't closed yet, which could indicate higher or lower sales prices than you have at the than the information that's available to you at the time you're advising them of the value of their property. All right? Okay, so we're going to move on now to the next document, water conserving plumbing fixtures and carbon monoxide detector notice. Okay, so in certain cities we have programs that actually have much more restrictive laws concerning these items, but we're going to go over first California state law. California state law says that single-family properties, this would include condominiums, okay, require that if they're built on or before January 1st, 1994, you can circle that date, that they have to have water-conserving plumbing fixtures. That means like low-flow flush toilets, low-flow shower heads, and for multifamily, it's a different civil section code, but it has a different date. That if they are built, oh no, it's the same date, on or before January 1st, 1994, they have to be equipped with these fixtures as well. Fixtures after January 1st. Okay. Additionally, on or after January 1st, 2014, multifamily residential and commercial that's built prior to 1994 that is altered or improved is required to be equipped with water conserving plumbing fixtures as a condition of final approval if the alteration or improvement increases floor area space by more than 10%. This is probably going to be way above your heads, but this has something to do with, let's say you're selling multifamily or commercial, and a developer went in and they added significant square footage, 10% more than the previously existing square footage. Where can you find that? You can find that in property records. Considering most of them are built prior to 1994, it's probably going to apply anyways, but just so you know, there is a little caveat to the law there. Even if it's built after, if 10% or more square footage has been added, it's going to be part of the permitting process, but you still do need to check. Okay? Who checks these things for you guys? Retrofitting company. Retrofitting company. Okay. Section, let's see. We're going to skip down to section B. We're going to skip the exceptions section. This is just saying that historical property is exempt from these. Why do you think a historical property might be exempt from these requirements?
To touch them.
You're not allowed to alter them.
Yeah, you don't want to alter it. Well, you are with certain restrictions allowed to alter, but you know, upgrading to water conserving devices would dramatically affect the appearance, which would dramatically affect maybe the value of the property, the desirability of the property. And it may also mean that the seller has to go through and like repipe the entire property. That's sort of right, that's excessive, right? Demanding that a seller repipe an entire property to allow for low flow fixtures to be installed. So that's why. Let's see. Section C goes over what actually qualifies as a low flow toilet and the capacity there. Once again, stay out of this. You're a real estate agent, you're not a retrofitting contractor, so you're gonna have the retrofitting contractor verify all of these things. So even if you're not in the city of LA or a city that requires an actual retrofitting certificate, so like example, Beverly Hills actually has retrofitting requirements. However, they do not ask for the same certification that they do in city of LA. In city of LA, it's called Certificate of Compliance, and it's actually signed by a licensed contractor. The same thing should be happening with Beverly Hills, only it's not like a requirement through escrow the same way it is with the city of LA. It does need to be done, so keep that in mind as an agent. Anytime you're dealing with property in a city you're not super familiar with, who can you call to find out what those requirements are and certify those for you and your client? Retrofitter. Retrofitter. You want the retrofitter, because why? It takes liability off of you and your seller. Okay? So even if it's not a required certificate, you may still want to encourage a seller, if you're on the listing side, to get that certificate. Okay. 2, carbon monoxide detectors. So there have been all of these more restrictive laws that were passed by the state, and then within the city of LA, it's even more restrictive. Carbon monoxide detectors have to be installed in certain rooms, like outside of certain doors. They have to be powered in certain ways. Some of them need to be battery powered with backup and hard wiring. Once again, stay out of this. Just make sure your seller and buyer are aware that this needs to happen, and have the retrofitter take care of this, okay? All right. So we can skip through to, we can skip the rest of this document entirely, except we'll look at number 3, local requirements. Remember I keep on mentioning that certain cities have more restrictive requirements? This is the section that tells you about that. So if you can't get a hold of a retrofitter because it's closed, a great person to ask, just for a reference point if you need to know when it's after business hours, is an escrow officer. Haley's great. She'll give you her cell phone number if you want it. She usually responds to emails, at least to me, after hours, so you might want to try that.
Sorry, who did you say?
Haley, escrow,
Haley.
an escrow officer.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next page. The lead-based paint and lead-based paint hazard disclosure, also known as the FLD. The first thing that I would like to point out is in the second paragraph, where it says lead warning statement, lease or rental. I want you to circle housing built before 1978. This document is not required in a transaction if the property was built after 1978. Why is that? It's because paint no longer included lead after 1978. So, most property that you're going to deal with in your real estate career, at least here in Los Angeles, because there's not that much new development, is going to be built prior to 1978. Not always though. So just remember, if you have a transaction coordinator or you're taking care of the documentation on your own file, not to be asking the listing agent for the FLD if the property's built after 1978. Okay, it's not necessary. You may even have to remind our own office when they're asking for it. They'll say, hey, we're missing the FLD. And then they'll say, oh, not necessary, built after 1978. All right, so we're going to skip down to where it says seller or landlord's disclosure. Most of the time, even when a property is built back in the 20s or 30s, your current owner has no idea what was on the walls or what happened prior to them being there. There are probably 15 coats of paint between now and the time a home that old was built, right? So all you need to disclose here, all your seller, I should say, needs to disclose here, is if they actually know. There's no conjecture. No disclosure should include, information that's based on conjecture ever. Now, if you're the buyer's agent and you see something here, right, you do need to talk to your buyer about it. They may or may not want a lead-based paint inspection, but in all of my time in real estate, I haven't had one. Yes?
If you had a Section 8 property, can the Section 8 person that approves the property give you a hard time because of the lead?
That's something else we can talk about after class.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. You need to post rules for rent control property that say it could possibly contain lead. It should be publicly posted. That's for rental law though, in the city of LA and a few other, I think it's actually state law. If it's built prior to 1978, there needs to be something publicly posted in the building where everybody can see it. But we can talk about that more after class. All right, so we can skip through now Yeah, I think there are, right? There are more copies?
No.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There should be. Alrighty. Maybe,
You wanna share with it?
maybe sit next to someone and I do post, by the way, when I post my classes that are recorded like this one on social media, I do actually post a link to where where you can access all of the documents we're talking about. So everything I'm circling and making notes on my documents, I literally scan them and I upload the video, and then I also provide a link and I post on my Google Drive public access to these documents, okay? So if you ever want to reference the documents when you're listening to my classes, and I highly recommend that you do so you know what we're talking about, that link is there as well. All right, so now we're on, do we have 2 carbon monoxide detector notices in here? No. Yes, I don't know why. So maybe it's an updated form. Okay, so this form is called the CMD. So we used to have just the CMD. You can go ahead and take the CMD out of your package because it's now covered entirely in the newly updated form that we've already covered, which is the WCMD. Okay, so toss that page. All right, so we're going to move on to the agent visual inspection disclosure. This disclosure is required to be provided and completed by both the listing agent and selling agent. And by the way, if you are the buyer's agent, you need to get this handled before the expiration of the seller's disclosure contingency period. Because even though it's a document you're filling out, technically, this would be considered part of the seller disclosure package. The reason why is you're verifying information about the seller's property. So let me tell you a little story about how this document came into existence and why it came into existence. That way you'll understand a little bit better about what you should be looking for and how you should be filling it out. So I don't even know how long ago it was now, I'm not gonna give away my age, but at some point, there was a sale in Palo Alto, and if you're in the mentorship program, passing that sheet along, make sure you asterisk next to your name, or no, now we have a yes, no, huh?
Yeah, we have it.
Okay, so yes, indicate that you're in the mentorship program because I do track these classes and it's part of your graduation and I'll make sure I give you credit for it. If you join us, go ahead and sign in and say yes anyways, okay? All right, so this agent visual inspection disclosure came about because there was a property in the Palo Alto area, which is in Northern California. It's a very high value property area, somewhere between South San Francisco, like in the Stanford College area. So there was this beautiful house, and it's a very hilly area. It was a view home, and sellers put it on the market. Buyers bought it, 2 separate agents. The buyers had all their inspections, everything went fine, they closed the deal. About a month and a half later, middle of the night, literally that house fell off the hill, slid off the hill, and every single person in that home died. Now, all of the agents, all of the inspectors were totally honest when there was, an investigation into this after the fact. Okay, so the listing agent said, or maybe it was the buyer's agent, I don't remember who it was, said, the only thing I saw was there was an elevated rear porch step entry, like, steps up to the back door. So that I saw something, something leaning just on the wood on like one little section of the elevated porch there. But I'm not an inspector, we had it inspected, it was fine. So no one could be really held liable for it. I mean, I don't know if they went after the inspector after that or not. But what the California Department of Real Estate decided to do was say, you know what, we can't expect our agents to be inspectors. However, we want to avoid this situation from ever occurring in the future. So what we're going to do is we're going to create this document called Agent Visual Inspection Disclosure. That way if someone sees something, they don't know what it is, at least they can draw attention to it. It takes liability off of the agent, the brokerage, but it also just puts it out there. Everybody signs these documents, right? Everybody's reading the content in here. so that if there's anything that's amiss, even though you don't know what it is, at least someone has the opportunity to check it out and we can avoid, needless, loss like this. So when you're filling this out, you really want to make sure that you prove that you looked, that you were there. So it's one of my least favorite parts of the deal. It's time consuming. I take a copy of this printed with me or on my notepad. Not notepad, what do I call it? My tablet? Yeah. I'm not that old, I swear. On my tablet, and I'll literally go through and fill it out. And a lot of times, all that I'm pointing out is slight discoloration, and I'll say slight discoloration at north end of living room at ceiling, right? I don't know what it is. I'm not making conjecture. I'm not saying it was water damage. I'm not saying it was mold. I'm maybe even calling out scuff marks or discoloration in paint, right? I'm calling out scratches in the flooring. I might say floor seems to be leaning a little bit, right? A lot of times these things mean nothing, but at least it's out there. And if the buyer, seller, inspector want to investigate this further, then they can. It puts it out there in the world. One of the things I do want to know is oftentimes the seller's furniture or area rugs are covering large areas of the property. It is not okay to move those things unless you get permission. And for the Asian visual, I wouldn't do that. If your inspector needs access, I might have the listing agent make that request of their client. But what should you do then? You should notate literally in here. So like, let's see, on page 2, where it says entry or living room. And I can't see anything because rugs are covering the flooring. I might say minor scratching at visible areas of the floor that are visible. Bye, Chris.
Bye, have a good one. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I might say, I see like minor scuffs or scratching on the flooring where it's visible. And then I would say, but much of the floor is not available for visual inspection due to a large area rug covering it. Yes, Sharon?
Is this filled out by both
Yes,
sides?
both the
agent?
listing agent and the buyer's agent need to complete these. Yes, absolutely. I take it with me, like I said, to my very first inspections. I want to get this done sooner than later. So be more thorough than not. Even if that, and I explain to my clients, I even tell them this story. Sometimes sellers get a little weirded out because I'm nitpicking their property, right? So if I'm a listing agent and I'm going around like every single little flaw, I tell them the story I just told you, and they understand better, and then they're not as concerned about it. I'm telling them I'm picking out every little mark here because I need to prove that I looked at it, right? You don't have to crawl into anything, right? You're not expected to see stuff that's in closets unless you happen to notice it. What you're doing is you're visually inspecting the property, and that means the exterior too, okay? It means the driveway. So if I'm seeing cracks in the driveway, I'm notating those things, right? You're never making conjecture. You're simply making visual, qualitative remarks. And you're trying to, at least when you're describing them, say where it's at. Like I might say, on page 2, right? Most of your properties have multiple bedrooms, right? So bedroom number blank. And you have 1, 2, 3 of those spots. So I might identify the first one as master, right? I might identify the second as second bedroom at west end of property. Okay, so I want to make sure that I identify these at least. And by the way, if you have more than 3 bedrooms, there is a whole area on page 3 for other. But if you are ever lucky enough to sell a huge luxury home, you really need to draft an addendum, even on a Word doc. Just say see attached addendum, okay? And you need to try to use the same format and identify those areas and go through them. Just really look at this document when you fill it out. It will guide you through all of the things you need to look at. Don't think you're done because you've gone through the house. Double check, make sure. Any questions on this one? No? Okay. Sorry for the scary story, everyone seems sad now. But we're gonna make sure that doesn't happen again, so don't be sad about it. That was our fix.
When did that happen?
I wanna say 10 plus years ago, but I don't remember.
It's the highest earthquake area in California.
I don't think there was even an earthquake.
Well, the
There must have been
potential.
major foundation issues where it was,
So what?
I don't know. I don't know if they went out of the, after the inspector, I may have known when I originally heard why when the document was first introduced to real estate, but I don't remember. remember. I think the family eventually decided, they at least decided it was none of the agent's faults. I don't know if they were able to or how it works when they go after the inspection company, if they did.
Do
Can you imagine the
recommend,
people that sold it?
Oh yeah, I'm sure the sellers were just mortified, yes.
do you recommend a soil expert to go in
If,
with hillside?
yes, if you are selling a property that is on a hillside, I absolutely recommend having what's called a geological inspection as one of your core inspections. Your geological inspector and your general inspector will tell you if you need a structural engineer inspection as a secondary measure after the fact. My guess is if your geo inspector and your general are telling you those things, your client might want to walk away from the purchase entirely, okay? If you see a lot of movement in a house like that and you're going to take it as a listing, you may want to recommend that your seller does so before. Okay, the next document is a statewide buyer and seller advisory. I'm not going to go over this other than to generally tell you what it is. This is like the biggest, scary, end-all of end-all documents telling buyers and sellers what you need to do, what the rights and duties are, like filling out the disclosures, making sure the property is available for inspection, what the agent's responsibilities are in relation to providing those disclosures and documentation. Even if your seller does not disclose something, if you know about it, you are required to disclose it. It's one of the only times as an agent you don't have the duty of obedience, right? You cannot violate the law. So if you know about something and your seller is telling you not to disclose it, go to Brian right away. He will help you address it, because versus losing the client, losing the deal, you probably want to have a conference call with Brian, go over the statutes so you can get that fixed. Always, always, always go through the seller disclosure package with your client when you're filling it out. One little mistake or omission there can allow an agent like me on the other side to get more time for contingencies, but it can also cause major liability, okay? So what do we owe to the other side of a transaction in every deal that we do? Honesty and fairness. Honesty and fairness. We owe a whole lot more under fiduciary duty and agency relationship to our own client. But under no circumstance does our obedience requirement extend to breaking the law, covering something up.
And yet we keep running into agents that do.
Yes, and you will run into agents who do. You can ask someone for help when they don't want to disclose something to you. What Tamara is referring to is we wrote an offer on a property, and after we wrote the offer, so some disclosures are okay to give after you enter escrow. Well, there was a recent death on the property in this instance, and she didn't tell us until after we wrote the offer. It really should have been something that was disclosed on the MLS and upfront. It wasn't even a scary death or anything, but it should have been disclosed.
Within the last 6 months.
Yeah, and it was within the last 6 months, so it wasn't like it was a long time ago.
That will leave some structure.
Yeah. And then we had an escrow that canceled recently. The sellers disclosed one leaning post in the foundation underneath the house. Our inspector went under there and every single one was leaning this much. He was like, any movement, that house is gonna fall over. We felt unsafe being in there.
Oh my god.
There was more bad about that house, but I'll just leave it at that. Like, my personal belief is that I think that we were purposely misled. They did the very bare minimum in disclosing to us. There's no way that they knew about the one post without seeing the others. They're all separated this much. If you see one looking like someone was under the house to see that, they saw the other ones.
And he put it back on the market without disclosing it.
Yeah, there's nothing in the MLS.
So fun.
And then, last night, we have another escrow. By the way, we have 6 escrows. Tamara, good job.
Not only.
It's teamwork. We had one where on the seller property questionnaire, the seller disclosed that there had been LeadBased paint that was dealt with, all the surfaces that had lead-based paint were dealt with in the appropriate legally required mediation fashion. However, on the lead-based paint, he disclosed nothing. And I read those disclosures and I was like, well, it's one or it can't be, it's disclosed on one and not on the other. Either he accidentally checked yes on the SPQ and the lead-based paint disclosure's fine, or he did not accidentally fill out the SPQ, and he therefore also needs to go ahead and disclose that on the lead-based paint. You can't tell me you knew about lead-based paint and did something about it, but then you have no knowledge of lead-based paint ever being in the property. It's one or, it's one or the other. So he still didn't want to do it, but he wrote a big long explanation email. I said, that's fine, we'll attach that to it. Just make sure your seller signs it, we'll make sure our buyer signs it, okay? But you will run into agents all the time who are not disclosing properly. Do you have to be the bad guy and force their hand? Absolutely. You owe the duty to your client to make sure they have all the information that's there. And if you're lazy and you don't read them and you don't enforce it, even if it's hard with the other agent, who's responsible? You are.
I think the appraisal ones is the worst. Because that's hiding the fact, like the one that on Yermo.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything ever falls out of escrow and comes on the market, your clients are interested in it, first question to the listing agent before you show it is, why did it fall out? Do you have inspection reports? Has there been an appraisal? I'd like to see a copy.
And then you get, did you sell it for no reason? No appraisal, we haven't even gotten to do inspections. Really?
That could be the truth if it fell out in the first few days. But my guess is if it was a week or so later, a week or more later, that is absolutely not the case.
Yeah, but she gave herself away. She said the backup had, it was 610, and she asked for an appraisal removal, and they were like, if it doesn't appraise at 610, we don't want it, and she didn't give it to them, so.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Agents out there are shady, so protect your client. All right, so yes, the rest of this document, it goes through anything and everything a buyer and seller should consider, any and all inspections they can possibly have. I mean, it goes through checking Megan's law database. You guys know what that is?
Sexual.
Yeah, it's a map that the state provides showing where registered sex offenders are. We used to actually have a Megan's Law disclosure in our packages. We no longer use that. It was purposely taken out. On occasion, I still have agents that send it over, old school agents who clearly have not been to an updated requirements course, or maybe their brokerage hasn't handed that down. Zone maps, electronic signatures, home warranty. I mean, this is a pretty good place for yourself to read. I'd highly recommend that each and every one of you read this document in its entirety. You'll have a much clearer understanding of a lot of the variables that can, some of the stuff that always happens, but some of the stuff that can come up in your transactions that aren't otherwise very normal. Let's see. HOA stuff. Yeah, so I would read this just to familiarize yourself more with some of the requirements and some more lesser known things. The next section is our own KW. So every brokerage has what I call brokerage specific documents. Brokerage specific documents are things that our brokerage has attorneys draft up that are more all-encompassing and protect the brokerage from liability on things that could affect value that may or may not be known to most agents. But they cover everything, like everything in the LA area. So most of the stuff doesn't apply and it sounds scary. This is not one of them. We have a wire fraud advisory that is now automatically generated with the residential purchase agreement when you sign it. But Keller Williams has their own disclosure regarding online or wire fund transfer. Just talking about how there are people who have been committing fraud, who have had hackers alter wiring instructions that are sent to buyers by escrow, and those funds actually make it, out of the country, and then they're not recoverable, right? So that is why a lot of times when you open escrow sends a secure email out with a password directly to your client with those wiring instructions. I also like to get on the phone and verify those wiring instructions with my client, or have escrow do it if necessary, okay? So just keep that in mind, that's what this is
Encrypted and
about.
all that?
What's that?
Isn't all this wiring encrypted heavily and all that?
Some escrow companies are still literally just attaching it to the email and sending it out. That's not encrypted. That's technically against the law. Do I mind that? No, not if I know that they're correct. I don't know if I should be saying that on camera. So what I would do if I got non-encrypted wiring instructions is I'd literally print them out. I would literally get on the phone with the escrow company and I would verbally verify them. But most of them are sending them out via encrypted email now, so you don't have to worry about that. But if you're a buyer's agent, a lot of times you get crummy escrow, right? Crummy escrow who doesn't care about you or your client as much. So if that's all you've got, take it the extra step, pick up the phone, verify it. All right, moving on to the next document is KW's affiliated business arrangement disclosure. So, our laws say that, you know, if we are pushing or using services, or even if we're not, Keller Williams has to disclose other services they have financial interest in, like Cannon Hills Closing. Pele, you know, Cannon Hills Closings is owned at least partially, if not all, by our operating principals here at our office. So that's disclosed. Guaranteed rate mortgage, which we have an in-house, and it's, what is, gosh?
It's
Movement mortgage. Yeah, so I don't know guaranteed rate mortgage, maybe that's a DBA with Movement, I'm not sure. But even if it's not in our office, if there's an affiliation, if there's the possibility out there that a buyer could be using this mortgage company, that's why it's disclosed. Okay? And on here it says to buyers, they're not required to use these services. If your buyer has any, if your buyer wants to work, or buyer or seller want to work with a particular service provider, title, escrow, transaction coordinator, anybody, you need to honor that request, 100%. So I usually do recommend and choose services for my clients, but I do ask them, do you have anyone you'd like to use? If so, please let me know who they are. I'm happy to do so. And right, technically we're supposed to provide 3 referrals to our clients anytime we're recommending any sort of service provider. Now, as the buyer's agent, you don't typically get to choose escrow and title. When you write the offer, you do need to provide the explanation and option to your buyer. Would you like to write in escrow and title? It's not really standard because it's a seller's market and there may be multiple offers. So by allowing the seller to select those services, you have a better chance of getting your offer accepted. However, if it's not a multiple offer situation and they really want someone, you can write that in there. I'd probably also pick up the phone and tell the other agent that, hey, my buyer has a relationship with this escrow company. That's why I'm writing it in. Can you please grant it? They may or may not, right? You may get countered back, and at that point, it's your buyer's decision whether or not they want to go along with the seller's choice. But I would go that extra step and pick up the phone and explain why I'm writing my escrow company in so that it's not flat out denied. Okay, moving on to the next one, Keller Williams addendum. I'm not going to go through this line by line because this is, once again, like that big statewide buyer and seller advisory. This talks about everything, like waiver of inspections, permits, the fact that buyers need homeowners insurance, the square footage should be verified, that school boundary map should be verified. This is like an end-all of end-all. But there's also stuff on here that is not always relevant. Like California Fair Plan is a program for earthquake insurance in hillside properties, or stuff that's in brush areas, for people who might have a hard time getting insurance. That's probably not going to apply to most of your sales, right? So when your clients are reading these, if they read them in detail and they have questions, you need to be familiar enough with these to say, you know, like this does or does, you know, doesn't even apply to your property. Let's see. On page 3 of this document, it talks about Beverly Hills Hillside Ordinance, Los Angeles Hillside Ordinance. If the property is not in LA or Beverly Hills on a hillside, then this doesn't apply, right? It doesn't. But it's in here, just in case you happen to have a property that does. This is, once again, a disclosure made by KW's attorneys to protect our butts in the case that we forget anything or we're unaware of anything, but a lot of them, 100%, are not applicable. Let's see, for instance, on the same page 3.3, Historical Preservation Overlay Zones, HPOZ. Not all property is an HPOZ. Most of it's not. 5, Hancock Park, Beverly Center area, methane gas. Have you guys ever driven down Fairfax right before you hit Wilshire and you smell that nasty smell, the rotten egg smell? That's because there's methane gas all over the place in the area. So that's a disclosure, but that's not going to apply to most of the property in LA. Okay, so we're not gonna go through the rest of this. I just wanted you to have some examples of why a lot of these don't apply. You should, however, read them, because this is going to give you an edge on knowing what does affect certain areas. So when you are working with clients in a certain area, you do know when you go through these documents which ones you really need to address with them so that they're aware. Yes?
Where do you get these documents?
Well, I will have these all posted on my social media, but they are required in every single closing we have in this office. So you can get them from Brian Chung if you need. You can ask him, will you please email me the KW broker disclosure package? Yes.
So if he's taking care of all the paperwork for the escrow, automatically he's gonna be sending it?
Yes. But you should read this anyways, and remember, when I post my classes online, I also post a link to these. Okay? The last disclosure class I did, even though I only covered the SPQ and TDS, I actually uploaded this entire package so you have it as well, because you scanned it for me. So these are in there as well. So they'll be in 2 places on my social media for you to access it anytime if you want. All right, so we're gonna skip through page 5 here, and now we're at letter to homeowners, new duct sealing requirements you will benefit. Okay, so you don't know that much about this because your general inspector does it, but they check duct sealing requirements. So after October 1st, 2015, HVAC ducts, they're now tested to make sure that they're not leaking to a certain percentage, right? So most man-made seals are not airtight, but they should be pretty close. So if there is, and this is for energy saving, by the way, so your inspector is going to check to make sure that not more than 15% of the air that is moving through those ducts is leaking. And if he says that there are, it should be repaired. So this is a requirement, but I haven't actually seen anyone ever have it on a retrofitting certificate or have it done. In all honesty, these repairs are usually pretty minor, right? It means replacing some ducting or resealing it. So just as an agent, if you see those things come up during your general inspection process, you should be requesting on your request for repair that gets taken care of. And now you have this document and you can show them that it is required. Because most listing agents and sellers will be aware of that. And it is unfortunately somehow still not tested and required as part of our retrofitting, even though I think it should probably be included. All right, the next document is about seismic gas shutoff valve. What is this? It is a valve on the gas meter, the main gas meter. And if there is any significant movement, it automatically trips this valve and it will shut off the gas line. This is so that if we have an earthquake, there's not gas leaks all over the place. When I was in college, I used to have this neighbor who had her own parking space, but literally would come into the parking garage, and I don't know why it was only me. She would literally park her car behind mine. I missed school and I missed work at least 10 times because of this really inconsiderate woman. That's a very euphemistic term for how I feel about her, or felt about her, especially at that time. And this is a long time ago. Once again, don't want to reveal my age, but I didn't have Uber and I didn't have Lyft taking me to where I needed to go, so I had to figure this out, right? And I would go up there, and clearly she was home, right? And I would bang, bang, bang on that door, and she would not answer the door. Yeah, so rude, right? So I'm not very proud of it, but my very angry 18-year-old self used to walk up to her gas meter and kick the shit out of it, and it would flip it, and I would knew, hey, I can't make it to work on time, but I know you're gonna have a cold ass shower. So just an FYI, there are a lot of times where, and you might experience this in your own home, all of a sudden you have no gas, you can't turn on the stove, or your water's cold and that's how you figure it out. Something may have tripped the gas meter. If people are doing work under a home, even if it's not even work, let's say like a cable man or someone is crawling under something to go install lines, they may accidentally brush up against it or touch it. It's a very common thing, so it can be an inconvenience, but it is required to be on there, and that is so that people don't explode. We have an earthquake, okay? So it's required in the city of Los Angeles. Not all cities require it. So for instance, we have in Escrow in Culver City right now, there is no gas shutoff valve installed on the gas meter. The city doesn't require it. However, we did recommend to our buyer that they do it. Okay, but we can't demand that the seller do it because it's not a city requirement. It is in LA, I believe that it is in Beverly Hills also. I can't remember, but where can we check this, guys? Retrofitter. Call the retrofitter.
Doesn't the gas company do this?
The gas company used to go around and do it. They don't anymore. I don't know why. They stopped doing it years ago. They might if it's a brand new meter. I don't remember. But it needs to be done in either case. If it's not, maybe if it's a brand new meter, it's automatically included, but if it's not, the gas company does not come out and do it for you. Yeah, it's something you have a licensed plumber or retrofitter come out and do. And a permit needs to be pulled for it, guys. One of the biggest problems I have when I have a city building report that comes up is it shows that there is no permit for the automatic gas shutoff valve. This even happens in HOAs. So it can get complicated because you need HOA approval to have the HOA pay for it, or the unit owner that's selling their property hire the retrofitting company to pull the permit and have it installed. And it takes a few days for them to pull the permit, do the work, and then have the city out to come sign off on that permitted work. So keep that in mind when you have short closings or you have an HOA and you find this out, you're gonna need to move quickly. Okay. The same document, it goes through alterations to property, ultra low flow toilets, we've already spoken about. Keep in mind our brokerage disclosures, they go over a lot of the same information that's in the rest of the disclosure package. Disclosures beat issues into the ground, covering them multiple ways, and that's for a very specific reason, right? It's so that the seller doesn't have much grounds, or the buyer doesn't have much ground to come back and say, I didn't know, or, oh, I misunderstood, because it's been asked multiple ways, and so it can get very repetitive with your sellers when you're filling out a disclosure package, very repetitive with your buyers when they're reading one and completing one with you, but it is done that way for a reason, and I try to work that into my conversation so they understand, I know it's boring, I know we're beating the bush, we're beating a dead horse, but this is for your protection. Okay, so the next one is investment information advisory and release. Okay, so Forward Beverly Hills, by the way, is our parent company. Okay, we're actually Forward Beverly Hills and we're DBA, Keller Williams Beverly Hills. And that's very normal for real estate agencies, real estate brokerages. Okay, but it this disclosure talks about, let's see, how all of our partners, officers, agents, anyone who is at Forward Beverly Hills or Keller Williams is not supposed to provide these services to its clients. Tax advice, legal advice, including to selling real estate. That Keller Williams doesn't guarantee warrant of the accuracy, completeness, currentness, or timeliness of it, or otherwise endorse these views, opinions, or recommendations, or advocate the purchase or sale of real estate properties. Basically, this is to cover our butt. We're real estate agents. We can't be held liable for advice that they get from our affiliates or other companies that are under the umbrella of Forward Living. We are real estate agents. We are not tax advisors. Do I on occasion give clients information that delves into these areas? I do sometimes, right? But what I say is, there are tax implications to, this area that we're talking about. And I'm not a tax expert, so I'd highly recommend that you talk to an accountant or an estate planner, right? So make sure when you are talking with these areas of real estate that inevitably come up that aren't actually covered under our real estate license, you are letting them know, hey, this is not my area of expertise, this is what I know. If you need help making decisions or you need to know what the implications are, you should talk to a professional that specializes in this area, whether it be an attorney or a tax person, okay? You can provide them referrals. How many are we going to provide to them, guys?
3.
All right, let's see. Addendum B, agent inspection disclosure statement. All right, so this document just basically says that the buyer should investigate the property, right? We don't know as agents if the property's been recently renovated or altered, square footage. We don't know if it's permitted. Once again, we're just real estate agents, right? We only know the information that's provided us to the seller, by the seller. Sometimes the seller doesn't have accurate information or they have no information at all. So this is just a disclosure to clients saying that, you know, they should look into permits that can be obtained from the city. There are permit expediting companies who will go to the city for your buyer for like $100 to $150 and pull the entire package of permits. Does it mean it will have every permit in there? It's the city of LA, so probably not. Some of them are hard to read. But if it's ever in question, if something's permitted, you should probably encourage your clients to go ahead and pay that $100 or $150. There's a woman named Wendy Calhoun, and I believe Wendy is spelled Wendi. Calhoun is Calhoun, I believe. And I think you can find her if you Google her. She's who I use most of the time to go pull permits for me, for my clients if they want to see them.
And on the seller side, if they say, oh, it's permitted,
Do they have a copy of the permit? And
no.
yeah, so that's fine. You might recommend to your seller that they get a copy of the permit. If it was done recently, you can usually obtain a copy for free on LeadBased.com by typing in the property address if it is City of LA. So your seller can go ahead, you can go ahead and market the property that way and say that it was permitted. The buyer may ask for proof, right? And at that point, it's up to them or your seller who wants to pay for it and obtain it. But if it was me, I would go ahead and see if we could get it anyways prior to the time I listed it, just so there's no question. But that's just how I prefer to operate. I prefer to close my deal instead of have a surprise. Because what happens if the buyer finds out it's not, that deal might cancel, and I'd rather know that before I put it on the market.
So what's that website again?
The website? Oh, LADBS.org. And I forget, there's a few steps you need to go through. I think it's like online services. You can check, I think, property activity report is what it's called. And you type in just the numeric portion of the address, no suffixes, and then just the street name, no prefixes on the address, no directions, so just the numeric portion, the street name, and no suffixes. So like 123 Main. And it will provide you with options if there's more than one, and it will say street, avenue, and that's how you can locate which one is your property you're looking for. You click on it, and it will show recent permits and the permit number. It's hyperlinked. You can click on it. It will actually walk you through the permit. Now, that being said, not all permits you see on there show you a step-by-step summary of what was done. Sometimes it's very vague, okay? So if you use a permit, and you're not gonna see all permits on there. Permits have only started being put on there since we've been more, well, since the city of LA has been more modernized, right? So I wouldn't expect to find a permit on there from more than 7 years ago, I don't think.
Yeah, so if we have like a, for example, a seller, you know, the addition was done like 30 years ago. Seller says that it was done with a permit. We ask for proof. There's humming and hawing. Oh, we'll get it to you. We'll get it to you. What do you do?
So you just came in late,
Yeah.
but I just gave everyone a referral for a woman I use that actually goes to the city and pulls those permits.
Mhm.
Her name is Wendi Calhoun.
Gotcha.
WendiCalhoun. If you Google search her name and the word permits, you're gonna find contact info for her. She usually charges like somewhere between 100 to 150. Okay. All right. Back to our Addenda B agent inspection disclosure statement, the second paragraph. Here it says, further, buyer is advised that the condition of any unexposed flooring cannot be determined, right? So we don't know what's under carpeting. It may be damaged. You know, we're just not liable for that. I'm not even sure what happened that made us have to write this, but clearly someone tried to sue the office because there was hardwood flooring that they didn't like underneath carpets. Existing garageways and driveway access, entertainment services and alarm systems, as well as concern for hazardous materials including mold, will require special inspections. So, what it's referring to for existing garages, driveways, and way access is probably lot lines, any easements for shared driveways. this is something your title rep might be able to help you with. If you really have to, then you'd have a surveyor come out and usually survey one line of the lot for you to see if a fence is on a shared point or is actually on one owner's side of the property or the other. Most of the time that's not necessary, but just so you know, if that ever comes up, your title rep might have a referral for you, or might, depending on how much they like you, do send someone out for you for free to figure that out for you. Okay, and then the third paragraph is, right, any renovation plans may need extensive research or revision. So let's say I have a buyer, sees a house they love, they want to put a second floor on it, right? I'm not a builder, but as an agent, I might say to them, all right, you probably really need to talk to an architect or general contractor right now because the city often has really weird rules. Sometimes you can't build a second story at all. Sometimes the square footage is going to be limited. There are setback regulations saying how far property can extend into the property line in relation to the end of the property lines. So as an agent, you probably should mention that, but this disclosure is just saying, hey, that's not us, and you really need to obtain a professional in order to make those determinations. But as a good agent, you need to mention those things to your client because they're still going to be angry at you if their whole purpose was to buy a property, add a second floor, and they can't. And you never said, hey, you should probably check that out with a professional that can tell you if that's a viable thing or not. All right, next document is the insurance verification disclosure. So this just talks about how some insurance companies might not want to write a policy on a particular property. And this references increase in claims including mold. I haven't had it because of mold, but you know, like fire, like major fire hazard areas, I've had that before, or major landslide areas. So if your buyer is having, or if the previous owner has had a bunch of insurance claims on the property. So there are two ways to go about this. There is California Fair Plan insurance, right? That generally will insure property that other insurance carriers will not. But the best way to do it is to ask the listing agent to find out who the seller's current insurance carrier is. Most of the time that insurance carrier will go ahead and extend an insurance policy to the new buyer, right? They're already insuring the policy. So that's generally speaking the more cost-effective route to go. They may not do it. I've only had that happen one time in my career, and we had to go California Fair Plan. But just so you know, that's a workaround for a buyer who's having difficulty in obtaining insurance. Okay, next document. This is my least favorite disclosure ever. I think it's really stupid. It's a residential earthquake hazards report, and I believe it's the state that created this. It's asking some questions here, and there may be a few that your client can answer, but my guess is unless they're a foundation contractor or a licensed general contractor, they're going to have no idea what they're even being asked. Right, so let's go through these questions. Is the water heater raised, strapped, or anchored? That is required by state law anyhow, so it should be your general inspectors will let you know if it is. Most of your clients are going to know that one. Is the house anchored or bolted to the foundation? Some of your clients might know if they've done this work. What it's referring to is what's called an earthquake retrofit, not to be confused with your standard retrofit. Retrofit means updating to current code, basically. So it's a general blanket term. So when you work with out-of-area agents and you say the word retrofit for our City of LA properties, which are those carbon monoxide detectors, the water heater strapping, the low flow devices, they might actually think you're referring to, oh, we expect the seller to bolt the foundation. So I just want you to be aware of the fact that retrofitting is a general term. Back to this though, your client may know that yes, in fact, our foundation is bolted. Is it a bad thing if it's not? Not necessarily. But if it is bolted and they do know, and by the way, if they don't, it's okay, your general inspector will tell you if it is, mention it to your buyer. Because when they tell their insurance carrier the foundation of the home we're purchasing is bolted, they will most likely receive a discount, and they will like you even more. Okay? All right, the next one. If the house has cripple walls. I don't know what cripple walls are, and I worked at a foundation company for a little while. I mean, I might if I really thought about it, but Over here, where your client answers, there's doesn't apply and doesn't know. There may or may not be doesn't apply answers, but most of these are gonna, from here out, most of these are gonna be an I don't know, my guess, unless you have, like I said, a contractor client. So if the house has cripple walls, they probably don't know, so they're probably not answering the next two. 4, if the exterior foundation or part of it is made of unreinforced masonry, has it been strengthened? That means brick, but they're probably not gonna know anyways, even if it is made of brick. Even if they know if it's made of brick, they're not gonna know if it's been strengthened, is my guess. But if they know, they know. And they'll be able to tell you. Otherwise, they'll look at you and be like, what does that mean? If the house is built on a hillside, well, we're gonna know that one, right? Okay, so if it is, we have secondary questions. Are the exterior tall foundation walls braced? So we probably know it's built on a hillside, but probably your client doesn't know the answer to that question either. Or the next one, were the tall posts or columns either built to resist earthquakes or have they been strengthened? Probably not gonna know. 6, if the exterior walls of the house or part of them are made of unreinforced masonry, have they been strengthened? Probably not gonna know. 7, if the house has a living area over the garage, right? So we're gonna know if it has a living area over the garage. So if it doesn't, your answer is what? It's not gonna be doesn't know, it's gonna be doesn't apply, right? But if it does, the question is, was the wall around the garage door opening either built to resist earthquakes or has it been strengthened? Your client may or may not know. They may or may not have been the one to add that accessory dwelling unit above. 8, is the house outside an Alquist Priolo earthquake fault zone? Zones immediately surrounding known earthquake faults. Your client's probably not going to know. And that's okay, because this question doesn't have to be answered. Do you see right over to the right side of that? It says, and I'm glad they put this in here because it didn't used to say this, to be reported on the Natural Hazard Disclosure Report. That's the NHD report that's ordered through escrow that all sellers are required to provide to buyers. 9, is the house outside a seismic hazard zone? Zone identified as susceptible to liquefaction or landslipping. FYI, most of LA is liquefaction zone, most of it. But, once again, this is going to be reported on the NHD package. The next document is just a receipt. And it's a receipt about environmental hazards and earthquake safety. If you're using Brian as a transaction coordinator, he's going to send a big fat booklet out to your clients. And it's basically, if you remember in school, them ever sending you home with earthquake safety packets, things like that, after earthquake drills and awareness in class. It's just going to talk about stuff like that. Most of your clients don't read it. If you're not using a TC, you do still need to legally deliver that booklet to them. You can get that from Brian, or you can get it by simply Googling online. And that's it for the rest of the disclosure package. Anyone have any questions? No? Okay, then we are good.